The content presented in this podcast series, inclusive of text, graphics, images, or other material, is intended for general information purposes only. The information presented is not intended to substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You are advised to seek medical advice from a trained or qualified medical professional before introducing new items into your diet or healthcare regimen.
Welcome to the Herbal Spot, the show where we have a chat with our invited guests who embrace our local plant biodiversity in Barbados and for this series across the Caribbean in their general living, their lifestyle, business, or research. Today, our guest is Dr. Ina Vandebroek, who has been working in the field of Caribbean ethnobotany for quite some time, and she is going to elaborate on this for us. Welcome, Ina.
Good morning, Dr. Peter. Thank you so much for having me on the Herbal Spot. It's an honor for me to be here.
It certainly is our pleasure. I'm going to share with our listeners a brief snapshot of your bio, and we are, of course, knowing that you've got so much more to relate with us as we have our chat. Ina has been researching, as she says, at the intersection of floristics, ethnobotany, community health, and conservation. Dr. Vandebroek has 20 years of experience in research and international cooperation projects in Bolivia, the Caribbean, and New York City. Currently, she conducts fieldwork in Jamaica in partnership with local community members and academic colleagues at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Ina studies plant diversity and the dynamics of traditional plant knowledge and use for primary health care, food security, and other subsistence needs by local communities in remote rural areas, as well as by Caribbean immigrants in New York City. That was indeed, though a snapshot, quite a mouthful, Ina. And could you just tell us at the outset, how did you get to this intersection that you described for us?
Well, Sonia, I was first trained as a biologist, and then I did my PhD in medical sciences, and I just tried to bring these two interests together with also a long-standing interest in culture and in cultural heritage. And you know, I grew up in Belgium, in Europe. But as a child, I was already very intrigued in going out into the forest and other natural areas and to study the plants and the animals there. And at the same time, I was also always reading books about culture, and so I brought all these interests together, and I was lucky and privileged to be able to do that. But so as my work has grown, I think it has become more and more invested into two things. The one is the community-based aspects and relevance of the work, of the research projects that I'm involved in. And secondly, the linkages between healthcare, community healthcare, and food security and food sovereignty and social justice. And ethnobotany or ethnobiology as a research field offers all kinds of opportunity to make these linkages and to do this work. And I feel very blessed and privileged to be able to do that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, I identify with your journey because I made my way into the study of ethnobotany through my exposure as a natural product chemist. And I always say that as you go deeper in studying within your domain, you always find the relevance to that human interaction. And for me, seeing that I was studying plants that were vibrant in terms of potential medicinal agents, obviously I would get to the point of, well, who first realized that these plants were so valuable outside of being a source of food and maybe fibers and the other uses? And you get exposed to that interrelationship that has been so vital for our survival. And the actual term ethnobotany is going to be pretty unusual. The thing are being circles, I do believe. How would you address that to someone who really asks you to define what is the study of ethnobotany?
Yes, there are several ways to explain it, but I like the more holistic explanation as which then refers to the term biocultural diversity, right? Which is the diversity of life.
Yeah.
So ethno is about people and botany is about plants, and it's about understanding how people perceive, manage, and use their environment and the natural resources in their environment.
Yeah.
But there is also the spiritual meaning of all that. It's about worldview. It's so much deeper than just studying the uses of plants or the uses of animals. It's really all the mutual interactions between people, plants, and the environment, and how crucial these linkages are in our daily lives as humans for our survival.
Yes, I do love that because that is truly the essence, I have always been quite fascinated with your work in the Caribbean diaspora. And I wonder, what is the key narrative that you take away when you take a deep dive? I was talking to someone, another guest recently, and she referred to her work as taking a deep dive into her field of interest. So when you take that dive into those communities, what is the key narrative that you take away?
So for me, being an immigrant myself in New York City for 16 years, what struck me most, what really resonated with me is how we immigrants bring our cultural traditions with us, our traditions related to, food, to medicine, to cultural heritage and identity. Also for myself, and this is something that has to do with our national dish in Belgium, right? That's mussels and fries. So I can eat mussels and fries in New York City, but they're not the same mussels and fries that I would eat at home. So I would want to go home to eat the mussels and fries there. So it's about, I think this whole diaspora ethnobotany is about communities really recreating home in a strange land, and doing that by, feeling the closeness, the linkages to their plants, to their foods, to their medicines, and to their cultural traditions.
That is beautifully said. And what helps that is that you walk with your traditional knowledge and your biocultural traditions at hand, and then you sort of see how it's possible to have that flavor of home within this new environment. How easy is that, though? How easy is it for persons in the diaspora to come as close as possible to recreating home in terms of exploring your biocultural tradition?
So in New York City, it's quite easy to do that because there are several hundreds of botanica shops that are operated by people from the Caribbean and from Latin America. And these shops sell plants and other items for physical health and spiritual well-being. So these plants and these other products are imported straight from the Caribbean or from Latin America or even from elsewhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And they're available in New York City. And it's a quite vibrant, albeit somewhat hidden from the mainstream society. So it's quite vibrant and known by the community. And people have access to hundreds of plants, and they have resource persons in these botanicas in which they have a lot of trust, and with whom they can speak about their cultural traditions. So they share a similar understanding of what ails them or what kind of products or plants should be used to improve their spiritual well-being. So in New York City, you have this quite vibrant community-based healthcare system. And then, of course, you also have the community gardens where people are growing their foods. And as you know, there is a very close link between foods that are used as medicines in the Caribbean as well. So there are a lot of opportunities for people to not only retain, but also to build on their cultural heritage in the diaspora in New York City. And when we interviewed 100 Jamaicans, 100 Dominicans, people from Dominican Republic, 100 people from Puerto Rico. Each of these groups had still knowledge about more than 200 different plant species. That's mind-boggling to me, right? So on the one hand, you have those traditions that are alive, and on the other hand, people have ways to obtain the plants and the products that are important to them.
Well, that is really great to hear, and it speaks to the resilience of the tradition. Made me think about New York. We think about the skyscrapers, and we think about the nightlife, and we think about celebrity, and it is certainly great to hear that persons are able to retain, their heritage. And I know this has to be through, as you're describing, very close-knit communities. Let's shift our discussion a little closer to Jamaica. And I understand that we can now put our official claims on you as you have taken up a post at the UB Mona campus. And I know that you've been working within Jamaican communities for quite some time. And I'm wondering, we all understand in the Caribbean about Jamaica as a leader in terms of culture and biocultural traditions, and how have they managed to preserve such a vibrant biocultural tradition that we know is linked to African heritage mainly?
I think it is twofold. On the one hand, Jamaica still has a really significant remaining forest cover that ranges from 30% to up to 55%, depending on which source you consult. And there are two important mountain ranges in Jamaica, the John Crow and Blue Mountains to the east, and Cockpit Country to the west. So that's one part of the explanation, I think. But the other part, so that's the plants part, right? But the other part, the people part, I think the art of self-reliance, Jamaicans and the art of self-reliance, and their deep connection to the land and to their family legacies that are really very visible in rural Jamaica. I think these two factors together might explain why there is such a vibrant biocultural tradition in Jamaica.
Yes. I know of traveling to conferences, and because of my thematic, which is always around plants and their value at the human interface, I always get asked if I'm Jamaican. And there are times when I start my presentation by making that statement, and it's saying how far we are from Jamaica. But at the same time, I think all Caribbean people tend to admire Jamaicans for that reliance that you spoke of, that resilience. There are many stories, even when they move away from Jamaica, that they really stand out in terms of defending themselves. So I want to take a look at some of the plants now that are so important to Jamaica as they preserve their biocultural traditions and heritage. So we're going to take a look at five of the plants that you think stand out within their tradition.
Sonia, that was such a hard selection to make because there are so many more important plants, but then we would have to have a weekly herbal spot meeting. But I tried to make a first selection here, right? And I started with the chainy roots because I've been collaborating on a project about the Jamaican root tonics, and that chainy root is called the dun, the most important, the bus plant in the root tonics.
What's the scientific name for that one?
All right, sorry about that. That's Smilax canalifolia. Smilax canalifolia. So it's a Smilacaceae. So it builds the body and it builds the blood, and it's a root that grows in the forest. It's a very tough root. So that strength, you're right. When you dig out the root, you chop it up, you boil it in water. It gives the water a red color. So it builds the blood, it builds the body, and the strength of that root, when you boil it, is transferred to the body. That's the explanation that community members give. It's also a very, very agreeable beverage because, in the English-speaking Caribbean, the tradition of drinking tea in the morning and the evening is so very important.
Yeah.
So chainy roots, I want to start with that one, Smilax canalifolia.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, so chainy root, that's a body builder, right? Body strength. Then I thought about a body cleanser. That's one that you also know and use in Barbados. That is Ceres Momordica charantia.
Yes.
Momordica charantia, Ceresea bitters. That's a body cleanser, blood cleanser.
Yeah.
There is a lot of an oral history tradition in Jamaica that in earlier days that children were given Ceresea bitter tea to drink before they went back to school, and it would clean them out.
Wow.
A third species that I selected is the vervine.
Yeah.
And that is, there are two species are in the genus Stachytarphyta.
Yeah.
You have Stachytarphyta canadensis and Stachytarphyta jamaicensis. They're very closely related.
Yeah.
And that one is used as a tea beverage also for humans' health. So anything that has to do with the menstruation, with the period.
Okay.
So you see there, women's health, you have the blood right. But also then vervine, when COVID, the COVID pandemic came up, and Jamaicans started to using vervine tea to prevent blood clotting
Oh.
So here you see the relationship between a traditional use originally for, women's health and menstruation, and then
Yeah.
being repurposed for blood clotting in COVID. This
Yeah.
is showing you how communities are so dynamic in their
Yes.
traditional knowledge. How traditional knowledge is not frozen in time. It's not static. It's not only something from the past. It's modern as well. So that's number 3.
Yep.
Number 4, I have guinea hen wheat, Petiveria alfaci,
Yeah.
which is used for several types of cancer, like prostate cancer, but
Yeah.
also for pain reliefs like headache,
Mm.
migraine, sinusitis. And also because guinea hen wheat, Petiveria alliaceae, smells of garlic, it is
Yeah.
good plant spiritual trouble.
Okay.
So if you have spiritual trouble, you can break the plant and smell it. And that
Okay.
garlic smell will ease your spiritual troubles.
Yep.
And then for my last plant, I was doubting between soursop, Annona muricata leaf tea,
Uh-huh.
our busy Pola acuminata, our single Bible, which is aloe vera. But I
Okay.
settled on sours. I settled on
Okay.
soursop,
Okay.
Annona muricata, the tea of the leaves. It's also very agreeable tea that you can just drink in the morning and in the evening, but it settles your nerves. It gives
Yeah,
you a
okay.
calmness, a
Yeah.
tranquility, a peace. And that's something what Jamaicans very much enjoy, in rural Jamaica. It's not uncommon when you say, how are you doing? And people say, well, I'm taking a rough life ease. Let me drink me sorrel tea, me soursop tea to settle me. So I would say nerves and soursop. That's my last plant for you.
I like how you said, pardon me, that we need to do a couple herbal spots to get through your list. That's my 5 because I know it's a challenge. But if we could sort of pick the 5 that tend to bubble to the top of the tradition, it is a worthwhile selection. We share 4 of them, numbers 2 to 5. And here, cerasee is used more for colds and flu, and also diabetes. Is used more as a nerve tonic, as it is described. Guinea hen weed has a number of uses, but cancer, is one. But I also came across a listing. I have it right next to me that says it's an obia plant.
That's also where when spirit trouble you, you break it and you smell it.
Yeah. It has a really potent aroma. You can just smell the sulfur compounds. Yeah, I think they're organic sulfur compounds in there. And soursop, soursop features very well here in what we call our cooling teas. And it's often recommended that if you are having trouble sleeping, a cup of soursop tea in the evening will do the work.
Right. So it settles in our nerves, right? Nice.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we understand that, across the Caribbean, we will share some similarities because we are drawing on the same biodiversity. We are drawing on the shared heritage. And as you said, the knowledge is there and it's dynamic, and therefore we can see relationships beyond what is currently tradition. And I liked how the use of vervain for blood clotting was found to be, something that evolved out of the tradition for women's health. there is that doctrine of signatures that says that if you look at the features of a plant, it tends to tell you where it is going to be most useful. And though I may not, as a scientist, buy into all of what that says, I think that there is embedded within us an intuition, if you want to call it that, but it's an intuition based on knowledge that has been passed on. In many instances, we are not even aware. It's sitting there within us. And it's a knowledge that allows us to interact with our plant material, as we need it for survival. What is your position about this doctrine of signatures?
I see it as a way that people take a plant and experiment with it further based on the explanation that are the perceptions that they have about that plant. So I always say people in the community are people in the forest. They're scientists just like us. They're experimenting plants, and then they have the feedback whether it works for them, whether it works for their families. So their explanations and everything they're doing should be really taken into account and valued more. I often feel that we as scientists place ourselves on a higher level as sort of our weird additional knowledge is no, that's what the people already are doing wherever they are in their communities, in their forests. And I dream of a world where we can all sit together and share
So I share your ideas, Ina, because I always argue that the enslaved individuals, when they were brought to the islands, and here in Barbados, they landed on the island in such a state of confusion, I can imagine, in their minds, but they had to find a path to survival. And that path to survival was embracing the biodiversity that was around them. And we have a list of about 50 plus plants that were embraced during that period. And it's amazing how the uses that they saw the plants useful for, that's a bit redundant, but it's been validated now as we take the plants into the lab and take a closer look at them. One of the things that I find amazing is wound healing. The plants that they identified for wound healing, we're finding that the latex from these plants, it's like a product that was made in a pharmacy, if you want to say that, in terms of the synergistic action of the natural agents in the latex. So I am agreeing with you there that our people had to be scientists. They had to make observations. They had to do trials and note what works and what doesn't work. And that is the quality of information that has been passed on to us. And we need to make use of it in our modern time.
One of my obsessions is really rural areas, urban spaces, transnational, but I think also within the Caribbean region. You already touched upon that. So one of the things that logically flows from that is that, how can we best work that national governments and also the education system, see the importance of that traditional knowledge at the community level. It's there, it's extensive. Mm-hmm. It's the heritage of Afro-descendant communities, and how can we build on across the Caribbean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I that is the space in which I'm operating as well, because again, I argue, I'm not sure in terms of Jamaica if this is the same reality, but we have quite a vibrant centenarian population. These are persons then who were born in the early 1900s. Their parents would have, come out to the cusp of the true ending of slavery, because we know that even though proclamations were made in the 1830s, that there was resistance to that. So these were individuals that did not come out of a designated healthcare system. And to be here living in the 2020s is absolutely remarkable. But that fortitude had to be based on that knowledge of how best we can use our plant resource for food, medicine, and whatever else we need to survive.
Yes, Sonia, and I really applaud what all that you're doing to promote biocultural heritage and diversity in the Caribbean through your program, through your podcast now. I think this is of utmost importance. And, you talked about your population of centenarians, right? So if our elders pass away, it's like a library full of knowledge passes away. And it's so important to uphold that knowledge, right? To really help to amplify in allyship with everything that people have been building up in their lives that has served their resilience, but that can also be of importance for the resilience of their grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Yeah. It is a beautiful narrative that is yet to be told properly and effectively in terms of, reaching the wider ears and the wider populations. And all of us who are working within the field are making an important contribution there. So this has been great. And I think you're right that we are going to need to do another segment with you. I'm sure there's so much that you can share with us. And I love the whole idea that we started to examine toward the end of our discussion in terms of looking at where policies need to go to help us in this work. We have a biennial symposium that started in 2019. And these are the conversations that I try to have when I invite individuals to be speakers at our symposium. I think it is so important to have a diverse voice as well, addressing these issues. And of course, as mentioned at the beginning of our chat, it is my hope that you'll be able to attend our symposium. Takes place in April of every year, so far for the first two editions. And I'm really looking forward then to hear more of your voice in 2023. But would you like to leave our listeners with any last thoughts you have in terms of the importance of our Caribbean biodiversity, the importance of investing in its conservation, and the embedded traditional knowledge?
Well, I would say the interconnectedness of that traditional knowledge, that we're not just talking about uses of plants for, let's say, healthcare, but that we look at that traditional knowledge as a really integral system of knowledge that interconnects health with food security, with social justice, with conservation of biocultural heritage, that we start building on a different language that is maybe outside the scientific language, where we try to focus on little bits and pieces and not on the whole. Ethnobotany and ethnobiology and traditional knowledge and local community, they tend on the whole, and the way our planet is going, our social crisis, our environmental crisis, we have to start focusing on the whole and build a different language. So that's my hope my hope is also that Caribbean governments really value traditional knowledge holders, local communities are still fighting the good fight, practicing the art of self-reliance, but who maybe are not heard and seen. So these kind of, the question, how does our work best support communities? How can we best educate our children? And the whole education system. So I feel like we have a lot of issues to tackle, and I hope that we unite to do it.
Thank you so much for being our guest on this episode, Ina. It really has been a very enriching discussion for me. And again, I just want to reiterate that we look forward to having you at our Plants and Planting for the Future. That's the thematic of the symposium in 2023. I want to wish you all the best and continued success in your work as you teach and explore ethnobotany in the Caribbean.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter. Thank you so much, dear Sonia. And I look forward to sitting and reasoning with you under the mango tree in 2023 or before that date.
Great. Thank you so much. Take care.